Chapter 10, Sport and Coaching Communication. The communication process. Communication is integral to our daily lives and is a critical element in sport and physical activity. In many situations, it's not what you know, but how well you can communicate information to others. Good communication skills are among the most important ingredients contributing to the performance enhancement and personal growth of sport and exercise participants. To be a successful sport and exercise professional, you must develop strong communication skills. Although the same process occurs in all communications, the purpose of communication can vary. All communication contains some content as well as a relation, or how you feel about someone within the message. Communication may incorporate several purposes: persuasion, evaluation, information, motivation, and for problem solving. There are two basic ways to communicate: interpersonally and intrapersonally, as well as nonverbal communication. Interpersonal communication involves at least two people and a meaningful exchange. This is what we typically think of as traditional communication. The sender intends to affect the response of a particular person or persons. The message or content may be received by the person for whom it was intended, by persons for whom it was not intended, or both. On occasion, the message may get distorted so that the sender's intended message does not get transmitted as originally intended. Nonverbal communication is sometimes referred to as nonverbal cues. Nonverbal communication is critical to imparting and receiving information. Behavior and elements of speech, aside from the words themselves, transmit meaning. Nonverbal communication includes pitch, speed, tone and volume of voice, gestures and facial expressions, body postures, stance, proximity to the listener, eye movements, contact, dress, and appearance. Interpersonal communication is sometimes called self-talk. This is the communication we have with ourselves. We communicate to ourselves a lot, and this inner dialogue is important. What we say to ourselves usually helps to shape and predict how we act and perform. Self-talk can affect motivation. We will talk about this a little more in the chapter on concentration as well. Effective communication can make the difference between success and failure among individuals and teams. Thankfully, effective communication can be taught to coaches and managers. There is a self-assessment scale to help individuals increase their self-awareness of their communication style called the Communication Self-Evaluation Assessment. People are often unaware of the many nonverbal cues they use while communicating. It is estimated that nearly 50 to 70% of all information in communication is received through nonverbal communication. Nonverbal messages are less likely to be under conscious control, and therefore they are harder to hide than verbal messages. Nonverbal message characteristics include physical appearance. Our first impression of people often comes from a physical appearance. The way we dress can convey powerful information to others. Athletes need to be careful about imparting information, whether positive or negative, through dress. Posture. How we carry ourselves. Our gait and our posture also sends messages to others. Someone who shuffles along with their head down and their hands shoved in their pockets may convey sadness compared to someone with a bouncy step that may suggest a sense of control and confidence. Body language influences athletes' perceptions of their competitors, and that perception affects the performance need of the individual. Body position. Body position refers to the personal space between you and others, and also to the position of your body with respect to others. Body position is an important aspect of proximatics, which is the study of how people communicate by the way they use space. Gestures. People's gestures often convey messages whether you want them to or not. Touching. Touching is a powerful form of nonverbal communication that can be utilized to calm someone, express affection, or other feelings dependent upon the situation. However, we need to be cognizant of sexual harassment when utilizing touch as a communication tool. You must make sure that the touching is appropriate and is welcomed by the student or athlete. Touching should be restricted to public places to minimize any misinterpretation of the meaning of your touching. Facial expressions. Your face is the most expressive part of your body. Eye contact can be vital to expressing feelings. A smile is usually considered a universal form of communication and easily crosses language barriers. And voice characteristics. The sound of the voice can reinforce or undercut verbal communication. Some say it's not what you say, but how you say it. The voice's quality often betrays true feelings, moods, and attitudes. Voice characteristics include pitch, either the voice is high or low, tempo, which is the speed, volume, either loud or soft, the rhythm, which is called the cadence, and the articulation or enunciation. Important take-home messages for sending messages effectively. Nonverbal messages are extremely important. Nonverbal messages are harder to hide and consciously control, and they're often accurate indicators of how a person truly feels. There are many guidelines for sending effective verbal and nonverbal messages as a leader. Some important things to keep in mind. For leaders, communication is the foundation for credibility and even respect. Credibility is reflected in members' attitudes about trustworthiness. And trust is linked to the concepts of honesty, integrity, sincerity, and truthfulness. So, what's the big deal with communication anyway? It is very difficult to regain someone's trust once it's broken. Words and nonverbal communication have a huge impact. Words can really hurt. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Although the old adage, words will always hurt me, is probably more appropriate. Once words and gestures are out there, you cannot take them back. So be careful what you do and what you say. Communication can break down or be misinterpreted. Some common perceptual problems can occur among coach and athlete's communication. There is a significant difference that exists between leader and follower perceptions of leadership behavior in the situation. Leaders often view situations as more ideal than do followers. And followers often see a big difference between what is happening and what they think should happen. We can help facilitate communication by participating in active listening. The best way to listen better is to listen actively. Active listening involves asking questions, paraphrasing, and attending to main and supportive ideas. Active listening also includes acknowledging and responding, giving appropriate feedback, and paying attention to the speaker's total communication. Some keys to participating in active listening. Paraphrase what the speaker has said when applicable. Here are some typical lead-ins for paraphrasing. What I hear you say is, let me see if I've got this right. You said, and what you're telling me is, don't mistake hearing for listening. Of all the things that make an individual feel accepted, significant, and worthwhile, none is more vital than being listened to. Good listening shows sensitivity and encourages an open exchange of ideas and feelings. In order to do this, you have to mentally prepare to listen. You must put away distractions and focus on the person's communication. If you are going into a difficult situation, you may even want to rehearse your message to make sure you're not sending cues other than what you intend. Being a supportive listener communicates that you are with the speaker and value the person's message. So how do we do this? Here are some tips to becoming a supportive listener. Some keys to supportive listening include using supportive behaviors. These behaviors communicate the message that other person is acknowledged, understood, and accepted. You are using supportive listening behaviors when you describe the other's behavior instead of trying to evaluate it or attack it. Focus on immediate thoughts and feelings. Are not calculating or manipulative. Ask open-ended questions to encourage the person to share their feelings. Are empathetic, not indifferent. And remain open to new ideas, perspectives, and the possibility of change. Use confirming behaviors as you listen. Let people know that you are with them in their conversation and that you understood their message, even if you don't agree with it. Confirming behavior, such as rephrasing what a person is saying, can help to show that you are paying attention, accepting, and are understanding. Also, the utilization of verbal and nonverbal listening behaviors. Nonverbal behaviors communicate interest and attention. Verbal behaviors should communicate an understanding and an acknowledgement of what the speaker is saying and feeling. Be aware that people react differently or individually to the way you communicate. Some tips for aware listening include: be flexible. You may have to try different listening strategies. There is not one best listening strategy, so different situations require different strategies. Be alert for barriers and breakdowns in communication. Barriers involve noise, such as other people talking while you are trying to listen. Breakdowns occur when messages are misinterpreted or misdirected. Often we are not aware that a breakdown has occurred until something bad happens that can be traced back to the breakdown. Communicating effectively requires skill and effort on the part of both people involved. The process can be complicated and frequently breaks down. One of the main reasons communicating is sometimes problematic is that many people believe that it's others rather than themselves who are ineffective. Therefore, they do not see the need to improve on their own communication skills. Some breakdowns in communication can come from sender failures. Sender failures occur as the sender may transmit a message poorly. There may be ambiguity or inconsistency in sending the message. This can be seen in the game of telephone. It all starts when someone says, "Maybe blue would work even better than green," which then translates to, "He said blue is better than green." The next person hears this as, "He says change it to blue," and the next receiver hears this as, "But green tested so much better than blue," which then gets interpreted as, "She says green is better than blue," and finally, "She insists on keeping it green." This message was transmitted poorly and then was inconsistent as it was transmitted among different group members. There can also be receiver failures. Receiver failures can occur if the listener fails to listen carefully, resulting in misinterpretation. Ineffective communication is a double-edged sword. Receivers, as well as senders, can contribute to the miscommunication. This can also be seen in the game of telephone. How much of this was the receiver failure versus sender failure? Barriers to ineffective communication include receiver not paying attention to the sender, the lack of trust between people communicating, social and hereditary differences causing misinterpretation between the sender and the receiver, differences in the mental set or perception between people, embarrassment, tendency to tell people what they want to hear, and difficulties in expression or reluctance to communicate. Some guidelines for sending effective verbal and nonverbal messages. Be direct. People who avoid straightforward communication often assume that others know just what they want and feel. Own your message. Use the words I and my, not we or the team, when referencing your message. What you are saying is what you believe, not what the team or others believe. Be complete and specific. Provide the person with all the information that they will need to fully understand your message. Be clear and consistent. Avoid double messages. Double messages send contradictory meanings, and usually the person sending them is afraid to be direct. State your needs and feelings clearly. We must be able to share our feelings and what we need to avoid miscommunication. Separate fact from opinion. State what you see, hear, or know, and then clearly identify any opinions or conclusions you have come to about these facts. And focus on one thing at a time. Organize your thoughts before speaking. Additionally, we can deliver messages immediately. Do not delay sending messages. Responding immediately makes for more effective feedback than a delayed response does. Avoid hidden agendas. Make sure your message does not contain a hidden agenda. A hidden agenda occurs when the stated purpose of the message is not the same as the real purpose. Be supportive. If you want someone else to listen, do not deliver the message with threats, sarcasm, negative comparison, or judgment. Be consistent with your nonverbal messages. Conflicting messages between verbal and nonverbal cues can confuse people and hinder future communication. Reinforce with repetition. Repeat key points to reinforce what you are saying, but be careful about doing this too much, or other people will stop listening. Make messages appropriate to the receiver's frame of reference. Messages can be better understood if you tailor them to the experiences of the person with whom you are communicating. And look for feedback that your message was accurately interpreted. Watch for verbal and nonverbal signals that the person to whom you are speaking is receiving the message as you intended. The second half of this lecture will focus on dealing with confrontation. Confrontation is usually a face-to-face discussion among people in conflict. Confrontation is often seen as a negative. However, despite its negative confrontation, when used properly, it can help both parties understand the issues more clearly without feelings of undue stress, guilt, or inadequacy. Use active and supportive listening techniques to avoid breakdowns that prevent effective communication. When to use or avoid confrontation. Avoid confrontation when you're angry. Many people regret the things that they say in anger, and once it's out there, you can't take it back, even with an apology. Do confront someone when you are in control, when you can express your feelings constructively, and only when you have well thought out reasons for doing so. Once you decide to use confrontation, we also need to know how to confront people. Here are some things to remember. Express feelings constructively. Think before you speak. Understand the situation and the person. Be empathetic. Be tentative, but not wishy-washy, and proceed gradually. The do's and don'ts of confronting. We'll start with the do's. Do convey that you value the relationship with the other person. Do go slowly and think about what you want to communicate. Do try to understand the other person's position. Put yourself in their shoes. And do listen carefully to what the other person is trying to communicate, especially if you don't agree. Don't communicate the solution. Rather, focus on the problem. We are all too eager to tell people what to do rather than letting them figure it out on their own. Don't stop communicating. Don't use put-downs. And don't rely on nonverbal hints to communicate your thoughts. The sandwich approach to constructive criticism. The sandwich approach to constructive criticism is the most effective way to present criticism to others. The sandwich approach is a technique for offering constructive feedback. This allows us to be sensitive, but to still communicate our criticism. The sandwich approach consists of 3 sequential elements: a positive statement, future-oriented instruction, and finally a compliment. An example of the sandwich approach. It starts with a positive statement. You may see something like, "You are really working hard out there." Once the person has become receptive through hearing the opening positive comment, hopefully then they will pay attention to the second part, the instructional feedback. The instructional feedback could be, "Next time, try to slow down and not get ahead of the music." The key aspect to the sandwich approach is the future-oriented instruction. This provides the instruction, behaviors, or strategies for the person to utilize the next time they are performing the skill. The comment must not ridicule, embarrass, or criticize the individual. Rather, point out things that they can improve on. And finally, the compliment. You're getting there, keep up the good work. After giving the instructional feedback, make sure the individual still feels good about their performance. You're likely to see that performance repeated or even improved the next time. Coach-athlete communication. The practical suggestions. We need to recognize individual differences among athletes. Use a style of communication that is comfortable. Be generous with praise and encouragement. Use consistent, nonverbal communication. Exercise self-control. Be supportive and empathetic with needs. And discuss communication needs with the team and with other athletes. The coach-athlete communication is one of the most important relationships in sports because it has been demonstrated to determine an athlete's satisfaction, self-esteem, and performance accomplishments. The compatibility dyad was created from a questionnaire called the Fundamental Interpersonal Relations Orientation Behavior, was administered to coaches and athletes to assess their self-perceived, wanted, and expressed typical social behaviors in the need areas of inclusion, control, and affection. Coaches and athletes were determined to be either compatible or incompatible. When coaches and athletes are compatible, they have good communication, and rewarding behaviors were present in the coach-athlete interaction. When coaches and athletes are incompatible, they are lacking communication, and rewarding behavior is likely to be absent. It was concluded that inclusive behavior was the predominant factor contributing to incompatibility in coach-athlete dyads. The quality of communication is the key to maintaining good compatibility. When examining coach-athlete communication, we find common things among good communicators. They establish open lines of communication. They're honest, fair, and consistent. And they respect athletes and workers outside of the athletic setting. So, how do we know if communication is good? We need to acknowledge that both verbal and nonverbal communication can take multiple forms. We can also acknowledge that there is a balance between communication and the observed compatibility in the coach-athlete model. Some communication models say that we should look for positive and negative manifestations of closeness, of like mutual respect, common belief, trust, or even love, commitment, dedication, sacrifice, satisfaction, complementarity, or how well the coaches and athletes complement each other's strengths, roles, tasks, and the ability to adapt. So, what makes a coach-athlete communication so good? There's quality interaction, there's good communication, and there is a mutual respect. The barriers to coach-athlete communication include difference of opinion resolvable by common sense, a clash of personalities in the group, a conflict of task or social roles in the group, struggling for power or status between each other, and either leader or group communication breakdowns.